Chapter 11. Real cooking. It's normal to all die. Glad I'm still alive. Lucky I'm still alive. Klein shuddered suddenly, took two quick steps and ran to the door, trying to catch up with several policemen and seek protection. But as soon as he touched the handle, his movements suddenly stopped. That police officer has made things so terrible. So why didn't they protect me as an important witness or key clue? Is this too careless? Temptation or bait? All kinds of thoughts are fighting in Klein's mind, which makes him suspect that the police are still staring at themselves in the dark and observing the reaction. Thought of here, his heart settled a lot. No longer so frightened, leisurely opened the door, and his voice deliberately trembled at the position of the stairs and shouted, "You'll protect me, right?" Bang, bang, bang. The police officers didn't respond, and the touch rhythm of leather shoes and wooden stairs didn't change. "I know. You will be like this." Klein shouted again in a tone of pretending to believe, trying to act like a normal person in danger. The footsteps faded away and disappeared into the ground floor of the apartment. Klein low snorted, belly laugh sad. This reaction is too fake. The acting skills are unqualified. He didn't chase down, turned back to the room and closed the door behind him. In the next few hours, Klein fully showed his restlessness, impatience and confusion, and did not relax his requirements because there was no one around. This is called actor's self-cultivation. He laughed at himself in this way. When the sun sets in the west, the clouds on the horizon burn, and apartment residents go home one after another, Klein shifts his focus to other places. Melissa will almost finish school. He turned his attention to the stove, lifted the kettle, peeled off the coal, and took out his revolver. Without pause or delay, he reached out his hand to the back of the wooden board in the lower layer of the high and low bed, where there were a dozen wooden bars staggered and supported. After putting the revolver between a piece of wood and a board, Klein straightened up and waited in fear that the police would suddenly burst open the door and rush into the room with guns. If it is a normal Steam world, when he did that move just now, he confirmed that he would not be seen by anyone. However, there is extraordinary power here, which has been verified by himself that after waiting for a few minutes, there was no movement at the door, so two tenants had to meet to go to the Wild Heart bar in Tycross Street, and the conversation went from far to near, and then from near to far. Who? Klein spat out a sigh and put his heart back in his chest, just waiting for Melissa to come back and make lamb stew with tender peas. As soon as this idea appeared, Klein's mouth seemed to overflow with the smell of gravy, and he also remembered how Melissa cooked lamb stew with tender peas. She first boiled water to copy the meat, then added onion, salt, a little pepper and water to stew directly, and then added peas and potatoes at a certain time to stew for 40 to 50 minutes. It's really simple and crude. It's supported by the delicious meat itself. Klein couldn't help shaking his head, but there is nothing that can be done about it. Ordinary people can't find a variety of seasonings and cooking techniques, and they can only pursue simplicity, practicality, and economy. Anyway, as long as the meat is not burnt or spoiled, it is good for people who eat it twice or even once a week. Klein is far from being a good cook. He mainly eats outside every day, but after cooking 3 or 4 times a week, he still has a passing standard and feels that he can't live up to that pound of lamb. Don't do it until Melissa comes back. It will be after 7:30, which will starve her. It's time for her to see the real cooking. Klein made an excuse for himself, first rekindled the fire, went to the public bathroom to pick up water and clean the lamb, then took out the cutting board and kitchen knife and chopped it into small pieces. As for how to explain the sudden cooking, he decided to blame Welch McGovern, a dead ghost. This classmate not only invited chefs who are good at the special flavor of the sea, but also often pondered the food himself and invited people to taste it. Well, the dead won't contradict me. However, this is a world with extraordinary people, and the dead may not be unable to speak. In this way, Klein somehow feels guilty. He put aside his messy thoughts, put the meat into the soup bowl, then took out the seasoning box, shook a spoonful and a half of yellow coarse salt in it, and took some black pepper particles from a special small bottle, grabbed them together with lamb meat and salt, and marinated them a little, put the saucepan on the stove. And while it is heating up, Klein rummages out the carrots left over from yesterday and cuts them into many pieces together with the onions he bought today. After preparing, he took out a small jar from the cupboard. After opening it, there was not much lard left in it. Klein took out a spoonful, put it in the pot, fried it and melted it, then poured in carrots and onion pieces and stirred it for a while till the smell began to diffuse, and Klein poured all the lamb and fried it carefully for a while. In this process, we should have ordered some cooking wine, but at worst, we have to use wine instead. However, Maridi's family didn't have these luxury things, and Benson could only drink a glass of beer a week. Klein had to make do with it, poured some boiled water, and fiddled with it casually. After stewing for about 20 minutes, he opened the lid, put the tender peas and cut potatoes in, and added a cup of hot water and 2 spoonfuls of salt, closed the lid, and turned down the fire. Klein exhales with satisfaction and waits for his sister to come home. As time goes by, the fragrance in the room is getting stronger and stronger, with the temptation of meat. the mellow of potatoes and the freshness of onions. The taste gradually mixed, and Klein swallowed saliva from time to time, pressed the lid of the table, and looked at the minute hand. After more than 40 minutes, the footsteps that were not brisk but orderly approached. The key was inserted, the handle was turned, and the door was opened. "It smells good." Before Melissa came in, she whispered doubtfully, holding her bag. She stepped in and glanced at the stove. "Did you do it?" Melissa took off the gauze cap and paused in midair, looking at Klein's eyes full of horror. She sniffed, inhaled more fragrance, and her eyes quickly softened, as if she had found some confidence. "Did you do it?" She asked again in doubt. "Are you afraid that I will waste lamb?" Klein smiled and asked, without waiting for an answer, and said to himself, "Don't worry, I specifically asked Welch how to cook this dish. You know, he has a good chef." "First time?" Melissa's brow wrinkled unconsciously, but it was smoothed by the fragrance. "It seems that I am very talented." Klein smiled. "It's almost ready. You put your book hat away, go to the bathroom to wash your hands, and then wait for a taste." "I'm very confident." Listening to my brother's orderly arrangement, looking at his gentle and calm smile, Melissa froze at the door and didn't respond. "Do you like the stew well done?" Klein urged with a smile. Good, good." Melissa came to her senses and rushed into the inner room with a handbag and a hat in one hand. When the lid of the saucepan was lifted, there was a mist coming out in front of Klein's eyes. 2 pieces of rye bread had been placed on the side of lamb and tender peas for them to absorb the fragrance and heat to become soft. When Melissa packed her things and returned from washing her hands and face, a plate of lamb stew with tender peas decorated with potatoes, carrots, and onions was placed on the desk, and 2 pieces of brown bread stained with gravy were on their own plates. "Come on, try it." Klein pointed to the wooden fork and spoon beside the plate. Melissa was still at a loss and didn't refuse. She picked up a fork, forked a potato, put it to her mouth, and took a bite. The glutinous powder of the potato and the aroma of the gravy permeated at the same time, which made her spit secrete wildly. After 3 or 2 times, she ate the potato and swallowed it. "Try the meat." Klein pointed to the plate with his chin. "He has tasted the taste just now, and thinks it is only above the passing line, but it is enough for a little girl who has never seen the market and can only eat meat occasionally." Melissa's eyes were filled with anticipation, and she carefully forked a piece of lamb. It was stewed badly, and it felt like it was about to melt as soon as it entered. The real meat burst out, and the wonderful juice flowed across the mouth. It was an unprecedented feeling, and Melissa couldn't stop. By the time she recovered, she had eaten several pieces of lamb. "Mimi, Klein, this is for you?" Melissa's face turned red, and she stammered, "I have already eaten secretly. This is the privilege of being a chef." Klein smiled and comforted his sister. At the same time, he also picked up a fork and spoon, sometimes eating a piece of meat, sometimes stuffing a mouthful of peas, and sometimes putting down the tableware and breaking a piece of black bread to eat with juice. Melissa relaxed, influenced by Klein's unusual behavior, and immersed herself in delicious food again. "It's delicious. I can't tell it's your first time." Melissa looked at the empty plate with no juice left and praised it sincerely. "Compared with Welch's chef, it's a long way off. When I have money, I'll take you and Benson out to a restaurant and eat better." Klein said that he was beginning to look forward to it. "You will burp at the interview." Before Melissa finished, she suddenly burst into a voice of satisfaction. She hurriedly put her hand over her mouth, looking embarrassed. "It's all because the lamb stew with tender peas was delicious." Klein did Sarah laugh. "Decided not to laugh at my sister," he said, pointing to the plate. "This is your task." "Okay." Melissa couldn't wait to stand up, take the basin, and rush to the door. When she came back from cleaning, she opened the cupboard and habitually checked the seasoning box and other items. "Did you just use it?" Melissa blurted out in surprise and turned to Klein, holding a black pepper bottle and a pig oil tank. Klein's stand hand laughed. "A little. This is the price of delicious food." Melissa eyes flashing, expression changed a few times. Finally, she pursed the lips way. "I'll cook in the future." "Well, you have to hurry up to prepare for the interview, and think about the work." Chapter 12. Come to the door again, sister. Can we not talk about which pot does not open? Klein secretly vomited, only to feel that his head began to ache again. The knowledge forgotten by the original owner is not too much, and there is definitely a lot. The interview will be held the day after tomorrow, so how can I make up for it, but also involved in strange and horrible events? How can you have the mind to review? After a few perfunctory words from his sister, Klein began to pretend to study, and Melissa moved a chair and sat next to her, doing her homework by the light of the gas lamp. The atmosphere was quiet and peaceful. At 11 o'clock, brother and sister said goodnight to each other and went to bed separately. Knock, knock, knock. There was a knock at the door, and Klein woke up from his dream. He looked at the dawn outside the window, had slightly confused turned sat up. "Who is it? What time is it? Why didn't Melissa wake me up?" "I, Dunsmith." A steady male voice answered outside the door. "Dunsmith?" "I don't know." Klein shook his head out of bed and walked to the door. He opened the door and saw the police officer with gray eyes yesterday. Is something wrong? Klein asked warily. Gray eyes officer solemnly answer. We found a coachman who confirmed that you went to Mr. Welch's residence on the 27th, the day when Mr. Welch and Ms. Naya died, and that Mr. Welch paid for your car. Klein hesitated for a moment, without any panic or guilt when the lie was exposed, because he was not lying at all. He felt that the evidence provided by Dunsmith, a police officer with gray eyes, was unexpected. On June 27th, the original owner did go to Welch's residence and committed suicide the night he came back, just like Welch and Naya. Klein opened his mouth, with a wry smile way. This is not strong enough evidence to directly prove that I have something to do with the deaths of Welch and Naya. To be honest, I also want to know what happened and find out what happened to my two poor friends, but I really can't remember. I almost completely forgot what I did on the 27th. You may not believe it, but I barely guessed that I might have been to Welch's residence on the 27th by my own notes. The psychological quality is good. Gray-eyed police officer Dunsmith nodded without anger or smiled. You should be able to hear my sincerity. Klein looked each other in the eye. I'm telling the truth. Of course. Only part of it done. Smith didn't respond immediately. The line of sight swept the room a circle to leisurely way. Mr. Welch lost a revolver. I think I can find him here, right, Mr. Klein? Sure enough. Klein finally figured out the origin of revolver, and his mind turned like lightning and made a decision instantly. He raised his hands halfway, stepped back, got out of the way, and then pointed his chin at the high and low bed. On the back of the bedboard. He didn't specify the one below, because normal people don't hide things on the back of the upper bedboard, which will make visitors see at a glance. Gray eyes officer Dunn didn't go forward, smoked the corners of the mouth. Nothing to add. Klein did not hesitate to answer. Yes. I woke up in the middle of the night before last, and I found myself lying on my desk, next to a revolver, with bullets at the foot of the wall. It looked like I had experienced a suicide, but maybe I was inexperienced, never used a pistol, or was scared at the last minute. In short, the bullets didn't achieve the expected effect. My head was still intact, and I lived to the present. Since then, I have forgotten some memories, including what I did at Welch's residence on the 27th and what I saw. I didn't lie. I really don't remember. In order to clear the suspicion and solve the strange events that haunt him, Klein told almost everything except crossing and gathering. In addition, he modified the wording to make every sentence stand the test. For example, he didn't say that the bullet didn't hit his head, but only said that it didn't achieve the expected effect, and his head was still intact afterwards. In other people's ears, the two express almost the same meaning, but in fact they are completely different. Gray eyes police officer Dunn listened quietly, slow opening. This is in line with my speculated development and the hidden logic of similar incidents before. Of course, I don't know how you survived. Just believe it, I don't know how I survived. Klein was a little relieved, but Dunn threw a turning point. I believe it's useless. Now you have a high suspicion. You must confirm through the confirmation of experts that you have really forgotten what happened, or that it didn't directly lead to the deaths of Mr. Welch and Ms. Naya. He coughed and his expression became serious. Mr. Klein, please cooperate with the investigation and come back to the police station with us. It will take about 2 to 3 days if you really have no problem. Is the expert here? Klein wait for a while asked. Didn't we say 2 days? She was earlier than we expected. Dunn leaned over and motioned for Klein to go out. I left a note. Klein requested Benson is still on a business trip and Melissa has gone to school, so she can only leave a message to tell them one thing about Welch so that they don't worry. Dunn don't care to nod. Yes. Klein went back to his desk, found out the paper, and began to think about the next thing. To be honest, he really doesn't want to meet the expert. After all, he still has a bigger secret. In places where there are 7 major churches, under the premise of the assassination of the suspected predecessor, Roselle the Great, most of such things as crossing are going to court and arbitration tribunal. However, without weapons, fighting skills, and extraordinary power, I am no match for a professional police officer. What's more, there are several Dunn subordinates standing in the dark outside. They pulled out their guns and fired a volley, even if they confessed. Oh, take it one step at a time. Klein left a note, took the key, and followed Dunn out of the room. In the dark corridor, for policemen in black and white squares were on both sides. Very alert. Bang, bang, bang. Klein followed Dunn, stepping on the wooden stairs, going down step by step, and sometimes hearing the creaking sound outside the apartment. There's a carriage with 4 wheels and a single horse. The side of the carriage is engraved with the police system sign of double swords crossing and surrounding the crown, and the surrounding area is as busy, crowded, and noisy as every morning before. Go up. Dunn motioned for Klein first. Klein was about to take a step when suddenly an oyster vendor caught a customer and accused him of being a thief. The two sides scuffled and surprised the horses, and the surrounding area suddenly became chaotic. Opportunity. Klein didn't have time to think much. So he bent forward and rushed into the crowd. Pushing or dodging, he ran wildly towards the other side of the street. Now, in order not to see the experts, we can only go to the pier outside the city. Take a boat down the Tasik River and escape to the capital Backlander, where there is a large population and it is easy to hide it, of course. You can also take a steam train, go east to the nearest inmate port, take the sea to Pulitzer, and then go to Backlander soon. Klein ran to the street corner and turned into Iron Cross Street, where several hired carriages were parked. Go to the pier outside the city. Klein jumped into one of them with a brace. He thought very clearly that he should first deliberately mislead the chasing police, and when the carriage drove out of a distance, he would jump directly. Okay. The driver pulled the reins. Da-da-da. The carriage left Iron Cross Street. Just as Klein was about to jump off the bus, he suddenly found that the carriage turned to another road, not the road outside the city. Where are you going? Klein paused and blurted out. To Welch's residence. The coachman replied in a flat tone. To what? Klein was stunned, and the coachman turned around, revealing deep and indifferent gray eyes, just like Officer Dunsmith. You. Klein was horrified and dizzy, and the whole person suddenly sat up. Sit up? Klein looked left and right doubtfully, and found that the red moon was blooming outside the window, and the room was covered with fine gauze. He stretched out his hand and touched his forehead, wet and cold, full of cold sweat, and the same feeling behind him. Had a nightmare? Klein slowly spit out a sigh. Well, he felt quite awake in his dream and could think calmly, which was quite strange. After a little relaxation, Klein took a look at his pocket watch and found that it was only 2 o'clock in the middle of the night. So he quietly got out of bed and planned to go to the public bathroom to wash his face and solve the problem of bloated abdomen by the way. Twist open the door. He came to the dark corridor, with faint indistinguishable moonlight, footsteps lightly close to the public bathroom. Suddenly, he saw a figure standing in front of the window at the end of the corridor. The figure was dressed in a black windbreaker shorter than a robe and longer than a formal dress. The figure was half immersed in the darkness, bathed in the cold crimson moonlight. The figure slowly turned the body, eyes deep, dark, and indifferent. Dunsmith, Chapter 13, Night Watchman. Klein couldn't help but take a step backwards, not knowing whether he was awake or still dreaming. The figure took off his black hat, bowed slightly, and smiled in a low voice. Meet the Night Watchman, Dunsmith. Night Watchman? What is the code name of the extraordinary team of the Night Goddess Church mentioned by Justice? And upside down Klein is suddenly, before Lenovo, suddenly blurted out. You manipulate dreams. You made me dream like that just now? Dunsmith, the Night Watchman, put on the black hat again, covering the slightly higher hairline, and her dark gray eyes implied a smile. No, I just entered your dream and made the necessary guidance. His voice is mellow and soft, and it echoes in the dark corridor like a dream without disturbing others. In the dream, although there are usually depressed emotions and various dark psychological amplification, making everything seem chaotic, absurd, and crazy, the truth still exists and is still hidden in it. For an old hand like me, everything is obvious and easy to see. I believe in you in my dream more than you are awake. This. Normal people who can control their dreams? If I dreamed of something on Earth, wouldn't Dunsmith find it? Klein was shocked and full of terror about what happened in his dream. But he soon tasted something strange, because he remembered that he was sober and rational in his dream and knew what to say and what not to say. Simply put, it's not like dreaming at all. So, Dunsmith just saw what I wanted him to see. Klein's thoughts turned sharply, and he had a little understanding. Is this the welfare that comes with crossing, such as the special spirit of itself, or the additional influence of the transit ceremony? So, Mr. Smith, are you sure I really lost my memory? Klein organized the language to ask. Dunsmith didn't answer directly, but gave him a deep look. You're not surprised at such a thing? The Klein I met before didn't believe that there would be extraordinary power, even if he had just finished his dream. He would rather think that he had not really woken up. Klein, well, a track. Maybe it's because I'm praying and expecting such strength to help me. Interesting thinking logic. Maybe you are not only lucky. Dun nodded without a smile. I can now confirm that you really lost some memories because of this incident, especially those related to the incident itself. Then I can go back? Klein breathed a sigh of relief and tried to ask. Dunn put his bag in one hand and walked slowly over. The night around him became quiet and gentle. No, you still have to meet the expert with me. The corners of his mouth turned up politely. Why? Klein blurted out and quickly added, You don't believe in your own guidance of dreams? Are you kidding? If the expert is good at hypnosis and mind reading, wouldn't my biggest secret be exposed? The result will be unimaginable. I have always been modest, but I still have some confidence in dreams. Dunn calmly replied, However, it is not bad to confirm the key and important things again. What's more, she is very different from what I am good at, which may help you recover some memories. Before Klein could say anything, his voice became heavy. After all, You are related to the whereabouts of the Antigone family note. What? Klein hesitated for a moment. Dunn stopped in front of him, gray eyes staring at his eyes. There is no note left over from the quaternary at the scene, not in the whole house. Welch is dead, Naya is dead, and you are the only clue. All right. Klein was silent for a moment and spat out a sigh. The notes are gone. This is really weird. I didn't even think about the whereabouts of that quaternary note before. Dunn nodded invisibly, crossing Klein, and said, "Lock the door and come with me to Welch's residence now. The expert is waiting for us there." Taking a silent breath, Klein's heartbeat drums and felt uneasy. He refused and even wanted to escape, but he believed that Dunn Smith must have raised his guard with the dream, and with the strength gap between normal people and extraordinary people, there would not be much possibility of success if he forced himself to do it. He must have a pistol on him. It should be the kind that he has practiced shooting many times. Various ideas in mind violent conflict. Klein finally chose to recognize the reality. Okay. Well, we can only take it one step at a time. Maybe that special thing in my dream will work again. Then let's go. Dunn's tone did not stir at all. Klein turned with 2 steps, suddenly stopped. Mr. Smith, I want to go to the bathroom first. I came out to go to the bathroom. Dunn didn't stop him, but gave him a deep look. No problem, Klein. Believe me, in the dark, I am far stronger than you think. In the dark. Klein repeated these words silently. He didn't try recklessly, but honestly solved the bloating of his lower abdomen, and then washed his face with cold water to completely calm himself down. After changing his coat and hat and closing his door, Klein followed Dunn down the stairs gently and walked to the door of the apartment. In this calm, Dunn Smith suddenly said, "At the end of the dream, why do you want to escape? What are you afraid of?" Klein mined such as electricity, thinking, and replied, "I don't remember what I did at Welch's house, and I don't remember whether it directly caused his and Naya's death. I'm afraid it will prove to be me in the end. I dare not gamble on this. I might as well run away and start a new life in the South China. If it were me, I would do the same." Dunn pushed open the door of the apartment and let the cool breeze in the middle of the night blow away the sultry inside. He was not afraid of Klein's escape, so he got into the carriage first. It was the one Klein had seen in his dream, 4-wheeled, single horse, and coachman. The side of the carriage was engraved with the police system logo of double swords crossed and surrounded by crowns. Klein followed and found that it was covered with a thick carpet, filled with the aroma that made people feel peaceful, sit down at will. He found the topic, trying to find out more. "Mr. Smith, experts prove that I really forgot that part of my memory, and there is no other evidence to prove that I am the perpetrator, not the victim. Then it's over? In theory, we will find the note from other ways. As long as it still exists, it can be found. Of course, before this, we will make sure that you have no curse, no smell of evil spirits, no corresponding psychological problems, and you can meet your future life safely and healthily." Dunn Smith put on a smile, a little odd smile. Klein, keen to capture this, without letting go, hurriedly asked, "In theory?" "Yes, just in theory. In this field, it is always full of distorted, counterintuitive, and unbelievable things." Dunn looked into Klein's eyes and said, "Their persistence and their end are sometimes beyond our control." "Like what?" Klein was a little scared at the moment. On the almost deserted street, the carriage was driving fast, and Dunn took out his pipe and smelled it. "When we think things are over and everything has returned to normal, it will come again in a frightening way. A few years ago, we handled a cult case. They organized believers to commit suicide to complete living sacrifices and please evil spirits. After one of the believers was selected, the instinct of survival overcame stupidity, unbelief, psychedelic drugs, and secretly ran to the police station to report the case. The matter was handed over to us, a very small task, because there was no extraordinary person in that cult, and the gods they sacrificed were just thought up by their leaders. In order to collect money and enjoy it, they annihilated human nature. We only used 2 players, plus the cooperation of the police, and successfully solved this cult, and no one escaped. And the informant, we also confirmed that he has no smell left by evil spirits, no curse entanglement, no psychological obstacles, no personality problems, and no other strange traces. After that, his career has developed well. He married a good wife and gave birth to a man and a woman. All the shadows seemed to be far away from him, and the horror and blood of the past seemed to have completely dissipated. Speaking of which, Dunn Smith smiled to say with smile. But just in March this year, the financial situation was good, the husband and wife had deep feelings, and the child was smart and lovely. He died and strangled himself in the office. The crimson moonlight outside the carriage window shone on Dunn Smith. At this moment, his seemingly self-deprecating smile made Klein feel terrible, unspeakable. Strangled himself. Klein took a silent breath and seemed to see his sad ending. Even if we dodged a bullet, we only escaped for a while. Is there any way to solve it completely? Make yourself an extraordinary person to fight. The carriage was silent, and Klein's countless ideas emerged and fell in succession. In this indescribable silence, the carriage traveled for a long time and quickly. Just as Klein made up his mind to ask Dunsmith for a solution, the carriage stopped. "Mr. Smith, Welch's residence has arrived." The driver's voice came into their ears. "Let's go down." Dunn cut the black trench coat to the knee position. "Oh, I introduced in advance that the expert is the most famous psychic in Wa County, Joni Aho." Klein convergence live other ideas, curious, and asked, "What about her actual identity?" Dunn half-turned the body, looking back, gray eyes deep way. "The real psychic." Chapter 14, Psychic, the real psychic. Klein recited this description, didn't speak again, and followed Dunsmith out of the carriage. Welch's residence in Tingen is a single-family house with a garden. Outside the hollowed-out iron gate, there is a road for 4 carriages to drive at the same time. There are street lamps on both sides of the road every 50 meters. They are different from those seen by Klein in his last life, belonging to gas lamps. The height of the columns is slightly equal to that of adult men, which is convenient for ignition and lighting. Black metal clings to the glass, enclosing a grid, casting a lantern-like classical art, dancing with cold and warmth, with shadows and light together. Stepping on the road covered with dim light, Klein and Dunsmith entered Welch's rented place through the half-closed iron gate. Right in front of the gate is a passage for 2 carriages, paved with cement, which leads directly to 2-story houses that has a garden on the left and a lawn on the right. The faint floral fragrance and refreshing taste are intertwined, which makes people relaxed and happy. As soon as he stepped in, Klein suddenly stood tall and looked around. He felt that in the garden, in the shadow of the lawn, on the top floor of the house, behind the swing, in a dark corner, there were pairs of eyes watching himself. Obviously, there is no one here, but Klein seems to be in a busy street. This strange contrast, this strange feeling, made his body tense, and there was a chill. From the coccyx upwards, there is a problem. He couldn't help reminding Dunn. Dunn walked in the side with the same emotion and replied flatly, "Never mind." Seeing that the night watchman said so, Klein endured the creepy feeling of being followed, spied on, looked at but couldn't find the target, and came to the front door of the single-family house step by step. "If I stay like this for a long time, I will be nervous." When Dunn reached out and knocked at the door, Klein looked back quickly. The flowers were swaying in the wind, and there was no figure. "Come in, gentlemen." A slightly ethereal voice came from the room. Dunn twist handle, through the door and push, to the woman sitting on the sofa. "Daly, have you got the result?" The chandelier in the living room was not lit, and a leather sofa with 2 pairs of patterns surrounded the coffee table made of marble. There is a candle burning on the coffee table, but the flame is brilliant blue, which casts a layer of swaying strange colors on the living room, dining room, and kitchen with semi-open layout. There was a lady sitting in the middle of the couch. She wore a black robe with a hood, blue eyeshadow and blush, and a silver chain with a white crystal pendant was wrapped around her exposed wrist. At the first sight of her, Klein had an inexplicable feeling, dressing like a real psychic. "Is this playing yourself?" Daly, a psychic with a rare aesthetic feeling, swept Klein with flashing green eyes and looked at Dunsmith's way. "The original spirits have disappeared, including Welch's and Naya's. Now the little guys here don't know anything." "Spirit? Psychic. Those unseen watchers just now are spirits? There are so many spirits?" Klein took off his hat, put it on his chest, and bowed slightly. "Good evening, madam." Dunsmith sighed. "It's really tricky. Daly, this is Klein Maridi. See what you can find out from him." Psychic, Daly's line of sight immediately turned to Klein, and she pointed to the deputy's single-person sofa way. "Please sit down." "Thank you." Klein nodded, walked a few steps, sat down honestly, and his heart lifted unconsciously. Life or death, whether it is a smooth ride or a secret exposure, depends on the next development. What makes me powerless most is that I lack something to rely on, and I can only hope for special. This is really a very bad feeling. Klein thought bitterly, as Dunn sat on the love seat opposite him. Psychic, Daly took out 2 thumb-sized glass bottles from the dark bag around her waist. Her green eyes smiled at Klein's way. "I need a little help. After all, you are not an enemy. You can't treat it directly and rudely. It will make you uncomfortable, feel pain, and even leave serious sequelae. I will give you some fragrance, give you enough tenderness and lubrication, and let you let go of yourself a little bit and really immerse yourself in that feeling." This word's how to listen to not quite right. Klein is staggering, eyes have a surprise, across the Dunn smiled to say with smile, "Don't be surprised, and the Bishop of Storm will be different from those guys. In our case, women can also verbally molest men. In this regard, you should be able to understand that your mother is a devout believer in the goddess, and you and your brother have also attended the Sunday school of the church." "I know, but I didn't expect it to be so." Klein gestured, didn't find the right adjective, and almost blurted out the corresponding translation of old driver. Done corners of the mouth become warped way. Don't worry, Daly rarely does this. She just wants to calm you down and relax in this way. She likes corpses more than men. You make me sound like a pervert. Psychic chimed in with a smile from Daly. She opened one of the small bottles and spilled a few drops into the bright blue candle flame. The pure dew distilled and extracted from night vanilla, sleeping flower, and chamomile. I call it Amanda, which means tranquility in Hermes. It smells good. While speaking, the candlelight shook a few times, and the few drops of pure dew evaporated quickly and filled the room. A beautiful and charming fragrance crept into Klein's nose. His mood was no longer tense, and his mind quickly calmed down, as if looking down at the darkness in the dead of night. This bottle is called Eye of the Spirit. It is made from bark and leaves of dragon tree and poplar tree by sun exposure for 7 days, decocting for 3 times, and soaking in Langji wine. Of course, there will be some mantras in the middle. The amber liquid, accompanied by the description of Psychic Daly, dripped on the bright blue candle. Klein smelled the fragrance of wine, ethereal and ethereal. He saw the candlelight shaking badly, and saw the strange luster of Daly's blue eyeshadow and blush, and even a double image appeared. It is a good helper for channeling, and it is also a charming flower essence. As Daly talked, Klein only felt her voice coming from all directions, confused and looking around. Klein found that everything was shaking and blurred, like a layer of thick fog, and his own body shook, blurred, floated and lost weight. Red is redder, blue is bluer, black is blacker, and the colors are mixed like impressionist oil paintings, blurred and dreamy, while the whispers around are coming in waves, like countless invisible people talking. This is similar to what I felt when I did the transshipment ceremony before, but it doesn't smell crazy and make people want to explode. Klein looked at all this and wondered at that moment. His eyes were attracted by a pair of glittering and translucent eyes like emeralds. Daly in black robe sat on the vague sofa, her eyes strangely focused on Klein's head, and her voice gently laughed. Formally meet me, Daly, the psychic. This, I can still think calmly and rationally, just like during the transshipment ceremony and party. Clay's mind moved and he deliberately showed a confused state. Hello, people's thinking is very broad, and there are many secrets hidden. Look, the sea. We can only understand the islands exposed above the sea, but in fact, under the sea, there is a bigger part of the island. But in fact, in addition to the islands, there is the whole sea and the endless sky, symbolizing the spiritual world. You are the spirit of the body. You not only know the islands exposed to the sea, but also know the part of the island hidden under the sea, and know the whole sea. Where there will be traces, and the memory of the island surface can be erased, but the part below the sea surface and the whole sea must have its remaining corresponding projection. Daly induced it over and over again, and the vague wind and shadow around it changed similar shapes. Just like Klein's mind, sea was completely exposed here, waiting for him to find and discover it himself. Klein calmly watched, churning the sea from time to time, and finally replied in an ethereal tone. No, I can't remember. I forgot. He showed the pain just right. Daly tried to induce again, but the sober Klein was not affected. Well, that's it. Go home. Go home. Go home. In the ethereal voice wandering, Daly disappeared. The wind and shadows began to subside, and the quiet taste and faint wine fragrance reappeared. All the colors returned to normal, and the vague and confusing feeling no longer appeared. Klein trembled and regained his weight. He opened his eyes when he didn't know when he closed them, and found that it was still the candle with bright blue lights in front of him, or Dunsmith sitting comfortably, or Daly, a psychic with a hood and black robe. How did you use the theory of the evil lunatics of the Psychological Alchemy Association? Dunn frowned slightly and looked at Daly. Daly put away the 2 small bottles and calmly answered, I think it's quite right, at least in line with what I have seen and touched. Before Dunn spoke again, she laid hands on him. It's a tough guy, leaving no trace. Themselves contemptuously and curiously, asking rude workers and unemployed hooligans if they like to participate in boxing and gambling in pubs. In addition to boxing and cards, do gambling events also include cruel and bloody events such as cockfighting and dogfighting? The little man laughed at. Sir, we're civilized people and won't do such shameful things. Speaking of this, he muttered in a low voice, and last year, a law was issued to ban these things. So, what are you betting on? Klein was curious for a moment. See who is a good hunter. The little man had just finished, and there was a sensation in the field. He turned to look, excited, motioning with his hand, said, This game has started, so you can't bet. Wait for the next game. When Klein heard this, he stood on tiptoe and raised his head. As far as he could see, he saw 2 strong men dragging a sack, came to the iron cage, opened the prison door and dumped the contents. That's a gray, disgusting animal. Klein carefully identified it and found that it was actually a mouse. Dozens of hundreds of mice, because there is no gap under the cage. The mice scurry around, but they can't escape. At this time, with the cage door closed, the chains of the 2 dogs were untied. Woof! The black dog jumped at it and killed a mouse in one bite. The black and white dog looked puzzled at first, and then played with the mice excitedly. People around you are either holding glasses, staring intently, or shouting loudly. Kill it.
Fuck it.
Doug. God, TM dog catches mice. Klein woke up and his mouth twitched. The gambling project here is actually betting on which dog catches more mice. Maybe we can bet a few more. No wonder people on Iron Cross Street have been buying live mice. That's really distinctive. Klein shook his head, funny back off. From the edge to bypass the crowded drinkers, came to the front of the bar. New face. The bartender looked up at him as he wiped the glass. 1 penny for rye beer, 2 pence for Enmate beer, 4 pence for Southwell beer, or would you like a single malt longsy? I'm looking for Mr. Wright. Klein spoke bluntly. The bartender whistled and shouted to the side. Old man, someone is looking for you. Well, who? A vague voice came out, and a drunken old man stood behind the bar. He rubbed his eyes and looked Klein way. Young man, you wanted to see me? Mr. Wright, I want to hire a mercenary team to do the task. Klein replied according to Dunn's command. Mercenary squad? Do you live in an adventure story? There's no such thing long ago. The bartender interjected with a smile. Wright was silent for a few seconds. Who told you to look here? Dunn Smith. Klein answered truthfully. Wright immediately haha laugh. I see, actually the mercenary squad still exists, only in a different form and with a name closer to the present society. You can find one on the 2nd floor of number 36 Sotland Street. Thank you. Klein thanked him sincerely and turned and squeezed out of the bar. Before he left the door, the drinkers around him suddenly quieted down, leaving only a murmur. Doug actually lost. Lost? Klein shook his head funny, quickly left and asked the way to the nearby Zotland Street. 30, 32, 34 here. He counted the house numbers and went into the stairs that around the corner. Step by step up, he saw the vertical sign, saw the so-called mercenary squad now name. Blackthorn Security Company. Chapter 17 Special Operations Department, Blackthorn Security Company. See signs. Klein lung for a long time. There is an unexpected but reasonable feeling that really, I don't know how to spit. He shook his head, climbed the stairs, reached out his right hand, and tapped on the half-closed door. Knock. 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 The slow and rhythmic knock on the door echoed, but there was no response in the room. Only the sound of da-da-da was faintly heard. Knock. 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 Klein repeated it again with the same result. Instead of knocking, he pushed, making the gap bigger, and his eyes followed. He saw a group of classical sofas, soft-faced armchairs, and log-colored tea tables for reception, a table directly opposite, and a girl with brown hair behind the table. Although the security company brand is just a disguise, it's too unprofessional, isn't it? How long has it been since business came? Well, you don't need any business. Klein condescended, leaned close, knocked on the table, and in the girl's ear again. A knock. Knock. The brown-haired girl sat up straight and suddenly picked up the newspaper spread out in front of her with both hands, blocking her face. The Honest Man newspaper in Tingen. Good name. Klein mused that the newspaper looked up towards his side. The steam train flying that goes directly to Constant City opened today? Really? When can it go directly to Dixie Bay? I don't want to go by boat again. It's too uncomfortable, very uncomfortable. Hey, who are you? The brown-haired girl pretended to read a passage and expressed her opinion. At some point, she lowered the newspaper, revealing a smooth forehead and light brown eyes, first pleasing and then looking at Klein in amazement. Hello, I'm Klein Maridi and I'm here at the invitation of Mr. Dunn Smith. Klein took off his hat, put it on his chest and bowed slightly. The brown-haired girl is in her early 20s, wearing a light green Luen-style long skirt, with beautiful lace on cuffs, neckline and chest, which makes her face more and more beautiful. Captain? Okay, you wait here, I'll ask him. The girl got up hurriedly and entered the inner room from the next door. Don't say anything about pouring a glass of water. The service consciousness is worrying. Klein smiled and waited in place, instead of going to the sofa and chair. After 2 or 3 minutes, the brown-haired girl pushed the door out and smiled sweetly. Mr. Maridi, please follow me. The captain is on duty at Cheney's Gate today and can't leave. Okay. Klein's warm step, in the mind is made a whisper. Cheney's Gate. What's that? Through the partition, the first thing that caught his eye was a short corridor, with 3 offices on the left and right. Some of these offices are locked and some are open, and people inside can be seen banging away, with heavy mechanical typewriters. At a glance, Klein found an acquaintance. The young police officer who came to search his home that day. The one with dark hair and blue eyes and romantic temperament. He didn't wear a formal suit, and his white shirt didn't go into his pants. He looked wild. Maybe he is really a poet? Klein nodded and smiled back. The brown-haired girl twisted the handle of the office on the left at the end, pushed the door open and pointed to it and laughed. I have to go down a few flights of stairs. There is nothing in this office. Only gray stone stairs extend down. The walls on both sides of the stairs are lit with elegant gaslights, and the steady light dispels the darkness and brings peace. The brown-haired girl walked ahead, staring at her feet and walking carefully. Although I often go here, I'm still afraid, always worried about falling down and rolling down. You don't know, Leonard did such a stupid thing. On the first day of becoming a sleepless, on the first day when he didn't fully grasp his own strength, he tried to run at the speed of sprint, and then he became a wheel. Haha, it's funny to think of it. Well, it's the guy who just greeted you, girl watching the road, while naturally invited Rehmannia said. Suddenly, she secretly took the forehead way. Forgot to introduce myself. My name is Luo Shan, and my father is a regular member of the Night Watchman, who died in an accident 5 years ago. In the future, we should be colleagues, we should use the word colleagues, not teammates. After all, we are not extraordinary. I hope to have this honor, but in the end it depends on what Mr. Smith says. Klein looked around the closed. Only feel 2 people began to enter the underground. The stone wall seeps out the cold, wet meaning, dispels the summer heat. Don't worry, I can let you come here directly, which means that the captain has agreed. I have always been a little afraid of the captain. Although he is very kind and caring, he gives my father the feeling, but I don't know why, but I am afraid. Luo Shan's voice is like a piece of candy, Klein responded humorously. Isn't it normal to be afraid of your father? That makes sense. Luo Shan stretched out his hand and helped the wall around the corner. While speaking, the 2 men walked down the spiral staircase and came to the flat ground paved with stone slabs. This is a long corridor, and the walls on both sides are also inlaid with gas lamps, surrounded by metal grids, which shed light and drag the shadows of Klein and Luo Shan. Klein keenly noticed that there was a dark emblem on the wall at intervals, which was the symbol of the goddess of the night. Dark black as the bottom, brightly decorated, surrounded by just half of the crimson moon. These holy emblems seem nothing special, but walking between them, Klein's mood is gradually peaceful, and Luo Shan also closed his mouth, no longer chatting like just now. Not long after, a crossroads appeared in front, and the brown-haired girl briefly introduced. Turn left to St. Selena's Church, turn right to weapons, materials, and documents, and go straight to Cheney's Gate. St. Selena's Church? Is Zotland Street just behind Red Moon Street? Klein was stunned. St. Selena Church on Red Moon Street is the headquarters of the Night Goddess Church in Tingen City, and it is a sacred place that local devout believers yearn for. Together with the Church of Steam and Machinery in the suburbs, the Church of the Bishop of Storm, which is also located in the north area of Tingen, it supports the religious circles of Tingen City and its affiliated towns and villages. Consciously, it is not suitable to ask more questions as he is now. Klein just listened silently and didn't make any noise. Cross the intersection and go straight ahead. In less than a minute, a black iron door with 7 holy emblems painted on it appeared in front of them. It stands there, intuitively giving people a heavy, cold, and overlooking feeling, just like a giant guarding in the dark. Cheney's Gate. Luo Shan said, pointing to the next room. The captain is inside. Go in yourself. Okay, please. Klein replied politely. Rosen refers to the room just in front of the Cheney's Gate, with the windows open and lights shining. Klein took a deep breath and remained calm to knock. 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 Come on in. Dunsmith's deep and warm voice came out. Klein gently pushed open the door left unlocked and saw that there was only a table and 4 chairs in it. Dunsmith, with a high hairline, was wearing the black trench coat last night and reading the newspaper leisurely. There was a gold bracelet near the button on his chest. Sit down and consider it. Are you sure you want to join us? Dunn put down his newspaper and asked with a smile. Klein took off his hat, made a ceremony, sat down at the table and nodded slowly. Yes, I'm sure. Then look at this contract. Hee. Now, everyone likes to call it a contract. Dunn opened the desk drawer and took out the contract in duplicate. There are not many clauses above, which are generally those that Dunsmith said before. The emphasis is on the confidentiality clause. The violator will not go through the court of the kingdom, but will be directly tried by the arbitration tribunal of the Night Goddess Church, just like soldiers and officers who go to a military court. 5-year contract. 2 £10 sellers weekly salary, 10 sellers confidentiality and risk allowance. Klein read them one by one and primly replied, I have no problem. Then sign it. Dunn pointed to the dark red pen and ink channel on the table. Klein first tried the pen with waste paper, then took a hidden breath and signed his name in the corresponding position of the 2 contracts. Klein Maridi. Because he didn't have a seal yet, he finally had to press his fingerprint. Dunn withdrew the contract and took out a seal from the drawer, which was stamped at the end and several key points respectively. After all this, he stood up, handed back a contract in one hand, and reached out to Klein in the other. Welcome, from now on, you are one of us. Note that the contract must be kept confidential. Klein followed up and took the contract, holding each other's hands and laughed. Then I should call you Captain? Yes. Dunn's gray eyes are unusually quiet in the dim environment. After shaking hands, the 2 men sat down separately. Klein looked at the seal on the contract and found that the words were Night Squad with market value in Tingen, VA County, Joni Aho, Ruin Kingdom. I really didn't expect you to use Blackthorn Security Company to cover it up. He laughed casually. Actually, we have another signboard. Dunn took out a piece of paper from the drawer. It is stamped with the double seals of the municipal government and the police department, and the content is 2 lines. Group 7, Special Operations Department, Wa County Police Department, Joniaho, Kingdom of Ruan. The first 4 groups are the normal police who undertake security, such as VIP Protection Unit and the Important Place Protection Group, etc. From the 5th group, it is aimed at supernatural events in various cities in the county. Our 7th group is responsible for the events related to the goddess believers in Tinjin City. If there are different believers, we will divide them according to the region. We are mainly in the North District, the West District, and the Jinwatong District. Dunn gave a brief introduction. The 6th group, which belongs to the team of the Episcopal Church of Storm, is responsible for the dock area, the eastern area and the southern area, and the university area, and the suburbs belong to the 5th group, which is the team of Mechanical Heart in Tinjin. Klein couldn't find anything to ask about it, but smiled instead. What if someone really comes to entrust a task because of the brand of Blackthorn Security Company? Why don't you answer it? As long as it does not affect daily affairs. Dunn spoke slowly and humorously and replied, the players are very happy to make money as an extra subsidy. Anyway, the troublesome and trivial things of finding a cat and a dog are now taken over by private detectives. How many people are there in our night watchman team? Klein asked on this topic. There are not many supernatural events, and there are not many extraordinary people. There are only 6 full members of the Night Watchman in the whole city of Tinjin, including me. You have 6 civil servants. Dunn answered slowly. Klein nodded and finally asked about the most concerned thing. Captain, you said the extraordinary out of control is how to return a responsibility? Why is it out of control? P.S. Every Monday, there will be a makeup, and a chapter will be updated in the early morning. Also, the gambling activities of dogs and mice in the last chapter are not my brain holes, but the pioneering work of the lower-class people in the corrupt country in Victorian times. I'll post the source of the information on WeChat official account later. Chapter 18 Origin and Reasons. First, more recommended votes. Hearing Klein's question, Dunn looked out the window at the corridor leading to the Cheney's gate, took out his pipe, stuffed tobacco and mint leaves, and then put it on his nose, and took a deep sniff with a slightly erratic voice. Only at home can I enjoy the wonderful taste of tobacco and mint leaves unscrupulously. Klein, do you know the myth of creation? Of course. When I was enlightened at the church Sunday school, I knew words by the revelation of the night, in which the 2 chapters of Book of Wisdom and Letters from the Holy One mentioned the myth of creation. Klein slowed down his speech while recalling the memory that the original owner had become a fragment. The creator woke up from chaos, broke the darkness, and created the first ray of light, and he completely integrated into the universe and became everything. His body became the earth and the stars, and one of his eyes became the sun, and the other the red moon. Some of his blood surged into the sea and rivers, nourishing and gestating life. Speaking of which, Klein stopped unconsciously, partly because the relevant memory behind him was vague, and partly because this creation myth was a bit similar to Pangu Kaitian's theory of a nation that ate big food. The imagination of people in different worlds in myths and legends has something in common. See Klein problem. Dunn smiled and helped him add. His lungs evolved into elves, his heart evolved into a giant, his liver evolved into a tree, his head evolved into a dragon, his kidney evolved into a feather snake, his hair evolved into an immortal bird, his ears evolved into a magic wolf, his mouth and teeth evolved into different species, his remaining body fluids evolved into sea monsters, the essence of which was Naga, his stomach, his small intestine and large intestine, and the evil parts of his body evolved into demons, evil spirits and all kinds of unknown evil beings, and his spirit became the eternal sun, the Lord of Storms, the God of knowledge and wisdom. Human beings were born in his wisdom. This is the first era, the era of chaos. Klein said the last sentence, and his heart felt funny and absurd. As a keyboard folklorist, it is the first time for him to come into contact with such a detailed creation myth of arrangement, and to list in detail which part of the creator derived each race that ranks first. It's like sitting in rows and eating fruit. Moreover, not only the classics of the goddess of the night say so, but also the Church of the Lord of the Storm and the god of steam and machinery has a similar description, without raising itself alone and belittling the rest of the gods. This either shows that the myth of creation is true, or vaguely reveals that several major churches finally reached an agreement after a long struggle and compromise before the 5th period in prehistoric times. Klein suddenly had another question at the thought of these, frowning slightly. I think there are some problems. Why is the eternal sun, the Lord of the Storm, the god of knowledge and wisdom born directly from the spirit of the creator, and the goddess is not? In the prehistoric records of Revelation of the Night, the goddess of the night didn't wake up until the end of the 2nd period, and together with the Lord of the Storm, the eternal sun and other gods, she blessed and helped mankind through the cataclysm, which is commonly known as the 3rd period, the cataclysm era. Mother Earth and God of War appeared at the same time, and the god of steam and machinery, formerly known as God of Craftsmen, was not born until the Quaternary. In this way, the status of the gods seems to be self-evident: who is older, who is more orthodox, and very clear. This has also caused some troubles among the believers of the goddess of the night. Dunsmith, holding his pipe in his other hand, did not answer and asked, "You give a complete description of the goddess' name." Klein suddenly felt that he had inserted himself with a knife, racking his brains and trying to recall. She is the goddess of night, higher than the starry sky and longer than eternity. She is also the Lord of Crimson, the mother of secrecy, the queen of adversity and fear, and the lord of sleep and silence. Fortunately, Klein's mother is a devout believer in the goddess of the night. When she was alive, she came to dinner every evening. Even if the memory of the original owner turned into pieces, it would not be lost. What does the Lord of Crimson symbolize? Dunn asked in a guiding tone. Red moon. As soon as Klein finished speaking, he seemed to understand. Which part of the creator derived the red moon? Dunn smiled and asked again. A single eye. Klein smiled at each other. This is no worse than the master of the storm formed by the split spirit of the creator. As for the Church of Mother Earth and God of War, there should be a similar statement. Only the god of steam and machinery was born too late to find a reason their church was always weak for more than 1,000 years before, until the invention of the steam engine took the lead, and it really stood side by side with others. Dunn rubbed his pipe. Human beings are born from the wisdom of the creator, so they have a clever and extraordinary head and lack other magical abilities. However, from the myth of creation, we can get a simple and clear conclusion that everything comes from the same origin. Born of the same origin. Klein repeated the last few words. According to this conclusion, under the protection of the gods, human beings who fought against giants, demons, aliens, etc. have gradually explored ways to gain extraordinary power. That is, to use evil spirits, dragons, monsters, magical trees, flowers, or corresponding parts of crystals and cooperate with other materials to make magic drugs, and then take them to absorb and master different abilities. This is the common sense of all occult schools. Dunn didn't describe it too much, but briefly introduced. In this process, our ancestors found that if they directly took high-grade and unconventional potions, it would be easy to get a tragic end, and there were only 3 possibilities. What 3 kinds? Klein asked curiously. First, mental death, physical collapse. Every piece of flesh and blood becomes a terrible monster. Second, the power contained in the potion instantly changes personality, becomes cold, sensitive, irritable, cruel, and ignores everything. Third, Dunn put down his pipe, picked up the porcelain cup next to him, and took a sip of it. Felmare coffee in Pass Valley is very bitter but also very fragrant, with a great aftertaste. I prefer the Highland coffee in Nepot. Of course, I only drank it at Welch's house a few times. Klein politely refused. What's the third? Insanity. Madness on the spot. More evil than the devil. This is out of control. Dunn stressed the word out of control. Before Klein spoke, he put away his coffee cup and continued. After a long experiment and exploration, and the birth of blasphemy tablets, mankind finally perfected the potion system and formed some sequence chains that gradually increased and steadily increased. The lower the sequence number, the higher the potion's order. Today, the 7 major churches have mastered at least one complete sequence, and there are other paths that have been collected for hundreds of years and thousands of years. Slate desecration? Klein has a keen grasp of this term. In the party, hanging upside down also mentioned it. According to the saying of hanging upside down, desecrating the slate is the most critical factor for the formation and integrity of the potion system. This is not quite the same as what Dunn just said. This is something made by some evil spirits. I don't know exactly when it appeared, what it was recorded, and what's special. If you find a clue, you must report it to me immediately. It has the highest response level. Dunn vaguely explained. Just now I mentioned one out of control, and now I will talk about the other 4. Klein put the question of desecrating the slate behind him and listened intently. Although human beings only have clever brains and no other extraordinary abilities, it is not absolute. There are always some lucky people or unfortunate people who are born with high inspiration. Well, that is, their ability to sense spirits. They can hear voices that others can't hear, see things that others can't see, and have some extraordinary characteristics. When Dunn spoke, he looked at the emptiness around him, and Klein was horrified. In other words, they are equal to half of the extraordinary people of Sequence 9, with fixed characteristics. Sequence 9 is the lowest grade in the chain. In short, they can only choose the corresponding and fixed sequence approach. If they take other potions, they will be slightly mentally abnormal, seriously out of control, and then seriously, I understand. Klein nodded slowly. The third kind of out of control is similar to the second kind. Once you choose the sequence chain, you can only go along this path, and you can't go back on your word. If you take other paths, the potions with the right sequence will have a high probability of mixing, strangeness, and distortion, but it is almost certain that you are in a semi-crazy state, or sensitive and irritable, or cruel and bloodthirsty, or silent. There is only one chance like this. In the future, whether you take the original path potion or the current sequence of potions, there is only one result that is out of control, depending on whether it is mental death, physical collapse into a monster, or evolution into an evil spirit. As Dunn spoke, he took another sip of his coffee cup. Hear some trepidation. Klein was silent for a few seconds and said, "What about the fourth out of control?" "The fourth, haha, this is one of the most common problems. We take potions and gain the ability originally belonging to extraordinary species, which is an unnatural evolution, and may be more or less affected by the residual spirit. Maybe there are no symptoms and outsiders can't detect them, but there must be hidden inside. Before we fully grasp the extraordinary power brought by potions and rule out those subtle traces, we rashly take corresponding potions with higher sequences, which will accumulate madness." After a pause, he sighed. "Our Night Watchman's internal regulations stipulate that even if the players have made great contributions, they must take the last magic medicine for 3 years and pass the corresponding examination before they can get promoted. But even so, many people lose control every year. It's terrible." Klein took a deep breath and said, "What about the last one?" Dunn corners of the mouth cock but no smile. "The fifth is also a common reason for losing control. For the extraordinary, the inspiration is more or less improved. The smaller the serial number, the more improvement. Therefore, you can hear voices that others can't hear, see things that others can't see, and encounter things that others won't encounter. You are always tempted by mystery and illusion. Once you have other stimuli or greedy desires, you will go out of control step by step." At some point, Dunn turned to face up, and the gray eyes reflected Klein's figure. His tone became Xiao Suaowei, the founder of the modern Night Watchman system. Archbishop Chanes once said, "We are guardians and a group of poor people who are always fighting against danger and madness." P.S. February 7th. Ask for recommended votes. Chapter 19 Seal. 2nd. More recommended votes. We are guardians and a group of poor people who are always fighting against danger and madness. The corridor outside the window is closed, the stone wall is cold, and the lights in the room are shining, bright and yellow. In such an environment, Dunn Smith's paraphrased voice lingers and knocks on Klein's heart, making him speechless for a short time. See Klein silently. Dunn shook his head and laughed. "Are you disappointed? Extraordinary people are not what you think, and we have been walking with danger. If you get it, there must be a price." Klein recovered from the shock just now and considered the tone to answer. He really didn't expect the extraordinary person to be radiant, extraordinary and different from the ordinary side, and there were such hidden dangers, but perhaps it was because he only heard the description, but he didn't really encounter it, or perhaps it was because he had been involved in this whirlpool. And maybe when something strange happened to him, his fears, uneasiness, worries, and fears soon fell to a controllable level. Of course, the idea of retreating is inevitable, and I will not leave. Yes, very mature, very rational. Dunn finished the rest of the coffee and added, "Also, the extraordinary person is not as strong as you think, and the extraordinary person with low sequence. Why should I use 1 to represent the highest grade, and 9 to represent the lowest? This is too counterintuitive and logical. The low sequence we usually say refers to the low order and high number, which is the beginning of the sequence chain." Well, where was I? Yes, the extraordinary person is not as powerful as you think. The strength of the low sequence extraordinary person is not comparable to that of firearms, let alone artillery. It is just more wonderful and more difficult to guard against in some respects. If you have the opportunity to become an extraordinary person in the future, you must carefully consider what I said today and don't make a rash choice. Klein's self-deprecating smile. "I don't know when I will get a chance." If he has this opportunity, he feels that he will not miss it. Taking the wrong potion and the over-the-top potion can be avoided to the greatest extent. The main hidden danger lies in the subtle influence of the potion itself and the unknown danger that he hears and sees after his inspiration is improved. The former has the experience reference of generations of ancestors. As long as you don't worry about the promotion and grasp the power slowly and steadily, the probability of losing control should still be relatively low. Moreover, it is mainly to solve the current potential danger, understand the essence of mysticism, and find a way to cross back so as to get out of this step, and it does not aim at the position of the high sequence. If it is really easy to get out of control, it will not be promoted if it is a big deal. It will stay in the original sequence and rely on knowledge to plan going home, not to mention the hidden dangers behind. Klein remembers the whispering that made him crazy, and his head was about to explode when he used the transshipment ceremony. This is not something that can be avoided without becoming an extraordinary person. In this case, it is better to master some forces that can be countered. At the thought of these, Klein only felt that the pros and cons were so clear that most of his shrinking thoughts disappeared. Done, and picked up the pipe. Gray eyes microstrip smile way. For this matter, I can't accurately answer if you want to be extraordinary. One is to get enough credit. Maybe you can interpret the key ancient documents tomorrow and the day after tomorrow, or provide very useful advice to our case. Second, see if there are any new ideas on it. No one can tell. Well, I think you should know more about the extraordinary, and you won't make an impulsive choice in the future. Now I'll introduce you to the civilian work of our night watchman team. He stood up and paced to the door, pointing to the Cheney's gate in the opposite direction. We have an accountant, a person who is responsible for purchasing necessary items, receiving materials issued by the church and the police, and working as a part-time driver. They are all professionals, and they don't need to rotate. They rest every Sunday. The remaining 3 civilians are Luo Shan, Brett, and Old Neil. Their jobs are receiving visitors, cleaning rooms, writing case documents and goods declaration lists, and guarding weapons, materials, and literature libraries, strictly entering and leaving and receiving return registration. Luo Shan and I do the same thing? Klein put away his thoughts on the extraordinary and confirmed his post responsibility. No, you don't. You are a professional. Dunn smiled. You have 2 things to do now. First, go out for a walk every morning or afternoon, focusing on the roads from Welch's residence to your home. Klein looked stupid. What is this work? Is it professional? Dunn put his hands into the pockets of a black trench coat and said, after confirming that you really lost your memory, the case of Welch and Naya is over. Similarly, the diary of the Antigonus family is completely missing. We suspect that you left with it and hid it on your way home, so we didn't find any clues in your home. This should be the possible reason why you committed suicide, at home instead of at the scene. Although you have been influenced by mystery and completely forgotten this memory, the human spirit and brain are wonderful, and there may be some traces left. Just because Daly can't get them by means of psychic, doesn't mean that they absolutely don't exist. Maybe in familiar places and key places, you will feel as if you have seen or done something. This is what we want. I see. Klein suddenly realized the night watchman's inference about the whereabouts of the diary is really reasonable among the people present at that time. Only they were alive, and only they had the time and motivation to take away the diary and hide it halfway. If you can find that diary in this way, you should get enough credit to become an extraordinary person. Dunn Smith encouraged me to say that it was important to reveal the diary indirectly. Hope. Klein nodded his head. Dunn turned the topic back again. Second, you take a day off every week, so you can decide for yourself what day it is for the time being. When you are not outside, go to the armory and read the documents and classics we have saved. This is the job of history professionals. After reading them all, you will rotate with Old Neil and them. Okay, no problem.